Okay, a little bit more of the chapter to add on here. A couple of things about isolation. One guy saying, I wouldn't worry with continental drift. Africa or South America should come by eventually. Just a few million years. The book does link to some interactive pages where you can drag and take these things through time, show how these different land groups have moved around, had a huge effect on the climate in different periods of time. And it does turn out that I mentioned that we don't have great dinosaur fossils here because where we are was in the middle of a very large, very big mountain chain, which is eroded mostly away down to the Adirondacks now. But the chain, if you look at what's left of it, it starts down around Georgia, comes up the east coast of the United States, through Tennessee and through Pennsylvania and through New York, and then across through Vermont and New Hampshire, and up through Nova Scotia, and across Newfoundland, and then down through Norway, and into Europe, and actually across the Alps, and the very tail end of that original mountain chain is in northern Africa, in Morocco. Some of it is worn back up again, as Africa and Europe have had a collision. That's where the mountains come from. They're basically rippled fenders from fender benders. North America is now slamming into the plate under the Pacific Ocean, and it's rippling our Rocky Mountains up and the Andes Mountains in South America. Is that India used to be a separate, India used to be a separate block that's slammed into the bottom of Asia, and so the Himalayan mountains is part of that ripple. So lots of isolation. At one point there was a lot of continuity, a lot of connections, and animals spread out without a lot of geographic barriers. But biogeography. Alfred Russel Wallace is considered to be kind of the granddaddy of biogeography because I mentioned before, wrote down a lot about the relationship between the types of animals and plants you find in different types of ecosystems. And ecosystems, if you take an ecology course, there's a lot of different types of ecosystems, beyond, like deserts and forests, and there's rainforests, and there's tropical rainforests, and there's temperate rainforests, and there's all sorts of different, what they call biomes. And because he had a lot of those in Indonesia, sprinkled across Southern Asia and Indonesia and in Australia, he got a pretty good idea of what sort of mixtures you get, what the parameters that the environment puts on what can and can't live there. Like in some parts of the world, the top predators are not cats or dogs or anything related to that, but lizards, because lizards have a much lower metabolic rate and they can get by on less food. And there's less food in their particular biomes. So they become the top predators because there isn't enough food to support a warm-blooded type. There's a term sometimes called type species, but typically called ecospecies. And that is same role, different place. What's the top predator over here? What's the top predator over here? What's the main ground cover plant here? What's the main ground cover plant there? What's the main canopy tree here? What's the main canopy tree there? And they're ecosystems. In New York, it's like if you go from lake to lake, is that the mixture of fish may be different, but there will be a fish that's like the top predatory fish and fish that are more the bottom feeders. But they won't always be the same species of fish, but they're basically in the same roles. There may be details that are different, but that's what an ecospecies is. And of course, that's where you get convergent evolution. where different species doing the same job in different places are gonna have similarities that are not necessarily connections of their relatives. It's more connections to adapting to doing a particular job. So how can corals and jellyfish, or at least those particular types of jellyfish, they call them medusae, all have the same genes? Because they're not actively using the same genes to do those different body forms. And through our lifetime, we have genes that we have active at certain periods of time and genes we don't have active at certain periods of time. When you have a tumor, one of the ways that a tumor survives is it releases a chemical that, as you're growing, causes new blood vessels to get into growing tissues. As you add tissues, you need to put blood vessels in there. Once you're an adult, you kind of stop doing that, so you stop making that chemical. But tumors survive by kind of randomly turning on abilities, and one of the abilities they sometimes turn on is what they call angiogenesis, blood vessel formation. And so they're epigenetically activating different genes. One of the nastiest genes that tumors will turn on is the gene that allows cells to crawl away and form a new tumor someplace else. But epigenetics is basically the study of being able to pass on these adjustments. We don't change the DNA and pass the DNA on, but we put like little molecular clips on the DNA to turn it off or activate it. And there are times where those get passed along in its modified form, in its activated or deactivated form. And so epigenetics is all about gene activation. Now, originally, epigenetics was any kind of thing that could be inherited that wasn't DNA. And when they discovered the mechanisms of turning genes on and off, they kind of swiped the term. And now the original epigenetics term is now called this. Memetics, right? You've heard of memes online, shared ideas, shared images. Is that language is memetic. We have a certain inbuilt ability for language, but our individual languages are memetic, and we can pass them on to other people. I'm passing stuff on to you now, and it is sort of genetic. You pass it on to somebody else, it may mutate, it may change. I'm sure stuff I've learned has mutated as I've taught it. So memetics are, and in nature, a bear can pass its territory on to its offspring. There's a whole bunch of things that we have that are not, that animals and plants have, positioning and other kinds of things that are not genetic, and they're not involved with DNA, but there's still things that could be inherited by offspring. Certain behaviors, is that animals sometimes learn behaviors from their elders. So it's not just people that do that, so animals do that as well. And those are considered to be memetics. Okay, I told you this was going to be a shorter video, and it is. That's the end of the genetics chapter.